Hey everybody, John here from the esports department going over the two-game LEC slate for tomorrow. Kind of an interesting one. I'll look at the bracket right here just so that everybody can see it. The upper bracket, Fnatic and G2, the winner of that's going to go straight to the finals. That's one of the matches that's on our slate for today. The other one, if you go down to the lower round one lower seed match down here, Mad and Schalke, that's the other match on the docket. The winner of this match will go to Worlds. Because the EU sends 4 teams, the top 4. Fnatic and G2 have already locked it up by being top 4. Rogue has already secured top 4 because there can only be 4 teams entering this total portion of the tournament. These 3 are all in there, and then the winner of Mad and Schalke will be the 4th team to enter there. It doesn't guarantee that they'll end up being the 4th seed. They have the ability to be anything as high as the 1st seed if they run all the way through the gauntlet, but the winner of this match will lock in Worlds. The loser will not be going to Worlds. So a very high value match for Mad and Schalke there, not just to win the league, but also to decide who's going to go to Worlds. So let's take a look at these matchups. The first one I think is the easier of the two. We have Fnatic versus G2. I did not look up the odds for this, apparently. Let's really quickly grab those. Normally I would just restart the video, but I'm sure you guys don't mind waiting like 2 seconds while I run over here, because I thought I had the odds already. I may have not saved the document after I looked them up. So we're dealing with Fnatic at plus 205, G2 at minus 300. Let's see, I did not save the odds for the other match either, so I just must have not saved them overall. There we go. Sorry about that, guys. So, Fnatic at plus 205, G2 at minus 300. This, for me, it's just impossible to go away from G2 on these slates. Look, Fnatic looked fantastic in their last match against Rogue. I mean, they made some mistakes here and there. G2 has not looked as dominant this season as they've looked any other season. If you want to get some low ownership on this slate, I think Fnatic is your play. That said, they just never beat G2, dude. They've played them like 10 times in best of series, and they just never beat G2. They've gotten 3-0'd before. They've made the series close before and lost in 5 games. They just never end up beating G2, and I have a really hard time going away from G2 in this matchup. That said, I mean, that just means you're going to get great leverage on Fnatic lineups in the big GPPs. The stats are reasonably close, 1816 to 1800 in gold per minute. Big gold differential per minute advantage, 77 to 12. Slight advantage in first blood to Fnatic, first turret to G2. G2's a little bit better on the Dragons, about 6%, and at 15 minutes, G2's a little better. That said, this matchup grades out pretty bloody, 17.7 to 18.2 for G2's death per loss, 19 kill per win for G2 to a 19.2 death per loss for Fnatic. Grades out very bloody. These teams do have very low kill participations traditionally, so I'm interested to see if they end up being the higher projected match. I'm actually guessing they won't be because of their kill participations. G2's actual fantasy scoring does not always line up with their kills. Back in the day, they were so much bloodier than everybody else, it didn't really matter. These days, they're kind of more in line with some of the other teams, and since their kill participation is quite bad, I wouldn't be surprised to see them not be the top play of the slate today. Let's look at the next matchup, though. This is the more interesting of the two, I think. Mad Lions at minus 150, Schalke at plus 110, 1794 to 1711 in gold per minute, gold differential per minute plus 90 to minus 38. First blood, first turret, both advantages to Mad Lions, a 19% dragon advantage, a gold differential at 15 of about 200 difference. Now, I know there's going to be some people, I guess I'll touch on the kill per win, death per loss first. Mad Lions 17.4 to the 15.5 death per loss of Schalke. 19.8 kill per win for Schalke, and a 20.8 death per loss for Mad. So I wouldn't be surprised if Schalke is the highest expectation team on the slate. They tend to have kind of high kill participations, and they grade out really well in the kill per win, death per loss. I can already see tons of people watching this video and going, you can't compare the whole season stats with these teams. You got to look at recent form. So Game Online doesn't have these exact stats or for time periods, at least that I'm aware of. So I just decided to pop down and look at some stats starting in week 5, because I think these stats are kind of interesting in the story that they tell. So early game rating, Schalke 57.2, Mad 58.2. So very slight advantage to Mad in the early game. In the mid to late rating, Schalke crushes them, 20.6 to minus 2.7. And at 15 minutes, Schalke has about 600 gold, better than Mad Lions. So this is interesting, right? Mad Lions' early game rating is higher, but at 15 minutes, Schalke is better off. First Blood, Mad about 23 points higher. First Turret, Mad about 45 points higher. Dragons, 5% edge in Dragons to Mad Lions. Baron, 60% to 78%. Elder Dragons, 50% to 100%. So you're getting kind of mixed stats when you only look at week 5 onwards. So you just basically are looking at the miracle run here, like the 7-2 end to the season. Or was it 8-2? One or the other. The end to the season for Schalke when they were playing their best league. And when they were playing their best league, I still don't think it's like some sort of overwhelming advantage to Schalke. I guess I would give a slight advantage to them. It's very interesting because the stats here tell a story that doesn't make sense. They say Schalke's early game rating is not as good as Mad's, but they're doing better at 15 minutes. And then they say Mad Lions' mid to late rating is way worse, but they get more Dragons, more Barons, more Elders. Interesting how the stats can end up being like that. What I see, I think, when I look at these stats, is that Mad Lions is playing a lot of very long, close games where they're getting Barons or they're getting leads and they're getting Dragons and Barons and Elders. And Schalke, for the most part, when they're winning, is just kind of running over. Probably not a lot of Elder Dragons in general in their games. Maybe even not a lot of Barons, would be my guess just from looking at the stats. And they're not winning through these win conditions for the most part. They're winning through just out-team fighting people and winning there. So I want to take a quick look. And this is my legitimately my first time going back and looking at this. Obviously, we watched this all happen together. But let's go back and look at these last, like, the miracle run. That's what I really want to look at for Schalke. So starting in week 6, this is when, like, the true miracle run begins. They beat G2 in a 32 kill game that goes 36 minutes. They're up by 15,000 gold. So, beating G2, very impressive. The reason that I discount this game a little bit is if you're ahead by 14,000 gold, the game should not go 36 minutes. If it does go 36 minutes, you should have finished significantly faster than 32 kills. So this tells me a lot of their numbers are probably getting propped up by this 32 kill right here. They took 5 Dragons in this game, but only 1 Baron, where G2 gets a Baron as well. 2 Barons, actually. Oh, no. I lie. I messed this up. So there's only 1 Baron in 36 minutes. So they must have struggled with getting Barons. This game is not a super impressive game for me. If you're this far ahead of a team and you're this many kills ahead of them and you're this much gold ahead of them, I don't see why the game should take 36 minutes. It's worth giving them some credit for this win for sure. G2's a great team, and they beat them. This was in the midst of the worst period that G2 had this year. The very beginning of the season, they struggled a fair bit, but this is still when they're coming out of that slump. Win that's worth some value here. On the same day, Mad Lions beats Fnatic 22-11, also in 36 minutes. A bit of a closer game, but still looks pretty one-sided for Mad Lions. The next day, Schalke beats Misfits. Obviously, Misfits had a pretty tough season. I don't think anyone's really giving too much value to that. But Mad Lions loses to SK Gaming, and it's fairly dominant. So I would say definitely a loss worth counting there for the Mad Lions. Week 7, Schalke plays XL. They win 12-4 in 27 minutes, so fairly dominant. This looks like they just took over the early game and snowballed it efficiently with macro. Good win there. Mad Lions beats Origin, who was probably the biggest letdown of the entire season. I don't know how much credit you give them for that. Schalke then beats Origin the next day. Same thing there. They absolutely crushed them. Once again, though, a 12,000 gold lead when they win the game at 35 minutes. 17-5. This is another game that worries me. Like, they struggled to close out. If the game took 35 minutes and they were up this much gold, that bothers me. Mad Lions then loses to Vitality. Now, here's a loss we can really count against the Mad Lions, in my opinion, because Vitality really, in theory, is a team that shouldn't be on their level. They lose in almost 40 minutes. They're down about 5k gold, so this looks exactly like what we might have guessed, that they got, like, from their mid to late rating being bad. It looks like they got outplayed in late game team fights. I'd have to go back and watch the game again to be sure. This seems like a game that they should win in the late game, in theory. Lee Sin not great in the late game for sure. Everybody else here scales pretty decently at least, and the GP would have an advantage over the set in a late game fight, I would think. So this one's a very serious knock to Mad Lions, I think. Going to week 8, Schalke beats Fnatic. At this point, Fnatic is basically playing for nothing. I don't give this much value at all. Mad Lions beats Misfits. Not really worth talking about, but do notice all the way down to about 30 minutes when they crush Misfits, as opposed to some of the things we've been seeing from Schalke. Schalke then beats Vitality. Not a lot of value there, but do notice once again, 10,000 gold lead took 36 minutes. A pretty slow closeout speed in general. Then Rogue beats Mad Lions. Rogue was very good in the regular season here. I don't really blame anyone for losing to them. They keep it to about 6K at time of loss at about 36 minutes, so it seems like they battled decently in the mid-game to try to stay alive, but doesn't look like they were ever really in danger of winning that game. And then the last game of the season, this one I don't give almost any credence to. Mad was playing for nothing here, and I highly predicted that Schalke would beat them in this matchup. I felt like almost for sure Schalke was going to beat them in this spot. I don't really like some of the champion picks I'm seeing from Mad Lions. For me, this series, I mean, I've gone through a lot of detail here for basically no reason, because really what I'm going to tell you is I think this series is pretty coin flippy. I think Mad Lions has the better players. I think Schalke has been playing better as a team as of recently. I personally really think that Mad Lions is going to come out and win this matchup, and I think they might even just stop Schalke. But I don't want to put that out into saying that that's like what you should glean from the stats and information that we have. The stats and information that we have really, I would say, leans slightly towards Schalke. The reason the odds aren't going that way is I think that most people kind of, or like the books are kind of feeling very similarly to me. Season long, Mad crushes them. Schalke spent 8 games wallowing, and then during the Miracle Run, I felt that a lot of their wins were kind of gimmies against teams that didn't really care about whether or not they won those games. I think some of those last week games in particular make a big deal about that. I said going into the last weekend, like, these guys are probably just going to qualify because people are just not caring at this point in the season. They already have their spots locked in. Everyone's going to play troll compositions against them and try to get a funny win. If they lose, then they'll, we helped the Miracle Run. It just was a no-win for their opponents. So I think Mad Lions is going to win this matchup, but the things really point to Schalke. They're an underdog. They're going to be cheap on the slate, and they have performed better in recent weeks. I mean, like I said, I think the stats are very interesting between the two teams. The fact that one says they're better in the early game and one says they're better in the mid-late, but the other stats don't really back that up. It's going to be an interesting matchup. Play whichever side of this one you want. I think it's really easy that the ownerships are going to be G2, and I think Schalke is actually going to be next, and then Mad, and then I think Fnatic will be the lowest owned by a fair bit. So I think G2 Schalke is probably going to be the most common pairing. I think G2 Mad will be a little bit less common because of how it plays out. I think most people feel like this matchup could go either way. And if they think this matchup could go either way, they'll go with the cheaper team that lets them get a big captain. It covers some extra coverall bases. So I think that's probably what we're looking at. If you're looking at the favorites, we'll just use the Vegas favorites for cash. You can get a humanoid captain with 4 Mad Lions. That gives you Caps and Mickey. That seems like a pretty great deal. Seems like a great cash lineup, 968.7 expectation. And there's some other ways you can build this lineup as well. You could potentially play Kaiser. Is there a way to play Kaiser here? And then maybe get a different G2 player? Yeah, you could switch over. So you could just switch out a Rome and put in Wonder if you wanted, and that makes a lot of sense to me as well. A lot of different ways to build it, but I think a humanoid captain for Mad makes sense. If we go through the projections, Mad is higher projected at 3 out of 5 positions. G2 gets the edge with the carries, and Mad is higher projected at the other 3 spots, so it makes sense to be heavier on Mad Lions. If you want to go with the team that's more likely to dominate their series, I think that's probably G2. So maybe you want to downgrade your captain and play for G2. But this one's been a little bit longer than some of the others because I think it's just a little bit interesting to look into the dichotomy of this Mad and Schalke matchup and try to decide where you're going to land on it. For me, it felt like Mad Lions came out, crushed, locked up playoffs and then kind of experimented with a bunch of different things, and their stats in the later part of the season look worse from experimenting around and trying to see what they can get away with. Whereas Schalke was the opposite. They only looked good in the last half of the season. So if you look at those last season stats, it starts to give you that Schalke feel, but something tells me Mad just comes out here and wins this series pretty straightforwardly. I might be way wrong. We might see Schalke come out and 3-0 them, but that's just how I'm looking at it, and I think it's a pretty interesting slate. That'll be all for me, I guess, guys. A kind of interesting little slate here. I think one of the more interesting two-gamers we could come up with. I'll definitely have some Fnatic lineups in here. I'll have a few floating around. I mean, with the ownership you're going to get on them, I just can't see much reason not to. If people are looking for an underdog to play, they're going to go towards Schalke, not Fnatic. So I think Fnatic makes a decent amount of sense for the huge GPPs. That'll be all for me for this one, guys. Just kind of an interesting scenario there, so I wanted to go into it a little bit deeper. But I will talk to you guys later. Good luck on the slate.